Annual tradition here at the Fenway Rundown, our annual Hall of Fame discussion. And as we do annually, this is a conversation I will moderate and not be able to participate in. I'm Chris Cotillo. Without a vote, joining me are two Hall of Fame voters, Sean McAdam and Chris Smith. You have to be in the Baseball Writers Association for 10 years. I think I'm a year away or 2 years away. Unfortunately, no one cares about that. So we will focus on the two men on the Zoom who do have votes. As we record this on Sunday morning to drop Monday morning, the results will be out Tuesday. Both Chris Smith and Sean McAdam have both revealed their votes publicly. Smitty in a Twitter thread that did numbers, as the kids say, a few weeks ago, and Sean in a column on Friday. So we are going to go through the different people on this ballot. As a reminder, one Hall of Famer is in, Jeff Kent. Sean, 10 seconds on Jeff Kent. Is he a Hall of Famer?
Not in my mind, no. I mean, very good career. The career leader in home runs for second baseman, but rather one-dimensional. And he did not get my vote when he was on the writers' ballot. He obviously didn't qualify that way. Got in through one of the era committees.
Yeah, so that's Sean said era, not error, but you can take
Right.
that in either way you want. So there are, the regular number of guys on the ballot this year. Everybody in the world is anticipating a really small class off of this ballot, and you are two of the, few hundred that get to determine it. So Sean had two get in. Chris, you had six. Is that correct? That you voted for?
Yes.
And so obviously a little overlap on the yeses, a little disagreement on the no's, and then a lot of guys that both of you left off. So we will get into it. We will start first with the two gentlemen that you both consider to be Hall of Famers. We will start with Sean, who I often termed the president of the fan club of one of them. Andrew Jones, in the minds of both Chris and Sean, is a Hall of Famer. Sean, you've been beating this drum for years, and it continues in 2026.
Yeah, perhaps this is the year that Andrew Jones finally gets in. He was at, I think, 69 or six in the high 60s last year.
You missed the 6-7 opportunity.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
There you go, kids.
let's edit that out.
Um, I have voted for Jones from year one. I believe him to be, as I have said repeatedly, the Ozzie Smith with power of center fielders. He is, by virtually every statistical measure, the best defensive center fielder of the post-expansion era. He had a total of 10 gold gloves, including, 8 gold gloves. He also hit better than 400 homers in his career. To me, that combination of outstanding defense and power makes him a Hall of Famer. Yes, I understand that in his 30s, he fell off the table. The numbers don't even look like the same player. I don't know what happened there. Some of it was, in retrospect, him not keeping himself in the best of shape after he left the Braves and started playing for the Dodgers and the Yankees and other teams over the last part of his career. But from about the age of 19 until 29 or 30, he was, as I said, the best defensive outfielder in the game, and he backed that up with power, with a bunch of home runs, better than 400 for his career. I believe there are only 3 players who have had at least 7 gold gloves and 7 seasons of 30 or more home runs. The other 2 are Willie Mays and Barry Bonds. Mays is, of course, in the discussion as greatest player of all time. Bonds would be in that discussion too, were it not for the PED allegations. But it's a measure of the company he keeps that Andrew Jones is on a list with those 2 others.
Yeah, definitely. Smith?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Sean said. The defense is, the Ozzie Smith comparison is right there. I've thought of it myself. Maybe it was because Sean said it maybe last year on the podcast, and that's why I was thinking about it this year. But that came through my mind. Like, you look at him and he's won 10 Gold Gloves in center field. He's tied with Ken Griffey Jr. for the second most, only behind Willie Mays. And I guess with Ozzie Smith, he had 500 more hits or whatever. And as Sean said, he took better care of himself, and Andrew Jones fell off in the past, after in his 30s. But if you look at it, well, 500 hits, yeah, that's more. But you also look at the power, and as Sean said, the power is just a major factor in it. I mean, if you have that kind of defense and that kind of power, 383 doubles too, over 400 home runs, he should be in the Hall of Fame. I don't know why he isn't.
And the expectation is that he will, and this is going to be pretty close. As we recorded this, the Hall of Fame tracker online was so overloaded with people trying to, or the voting tracker was so overloaded with people trying to access it that I couldn't access the numbers. But last time I checked, he was looking okay, right?
Yeah, he had cleared 75%. Those it's kind of tricky sometimes trying
Yeah.
to extrapolate what the early votes are there. Not everybody supplies those and reports them. Those that do, present company included, tend to be younger, excluded rather, tend to be younger voters. Ryan Thibodeau does a great job in compiling all that information. He fell short by, I think, 35 votes last year, 6 or 7% off.
Yeah.
And given that there is not anybody among the first-time players who is expected to make it, the expectation is that Jones will clear that threshold and another that we're about to talk about.
It's Carlos Beltran. He has only been on the ballot for a few years. This is his fourth chance in. Last year he got to 70.3. Jones last year was 66.2. Just to give you that exact number. No one else in the group was particularly close. Obviously the guys that did get in last year cleared that in Ichiro, Sabathia, and Wagner. Beltran was the closest. Both of you have him in. Two questions for Sean. Number one, why? And number two, you'll be on the lower end of every, of the count when it comes to only having two Hall of Famers get in. Is it, we've talked about this in the past, philosophy, as you kind of dovetail off the Beltran answer, small hall, or why did you land just there? And do you think this is the fewest guys you've ever voted for?
I'd have to go back and check, but it's certainly among the fewest I voted for. I've had the great privilege to do this for a long time now. Typically, I usually end up voting for, I would say, 3 or 4, sometimes as many as 5 or 6. But 2 is definitely on the low end. It wasn't intentional. But I would say a lot of it has to do with the fact that this is not a great first-time class.
Yeah.
As I wrote, the 2 guys that you would look at statistically
Spoilers.
and say, pardon me?
Spoilers.
Yes. The 2 guys that you would look at among the first-timers and at least think about maybe, Cole Hamels and Ryan Braun, to me, very good players, but they certainly fall short of Hall of Fame status in my mind. So there was nobody that I really gave a lot of thought to among the first-timers. There's probably, a dozen players new to the ballot this year. I don't think anyone expects any of those players to get in this year or frankly down the road. I don't see a lot of momentum building for any of these guys in the first time list. So that part was relatively easy for me. I didn't have to think about, strategically voting and who needs a vote to stay on and all of that. I typically don't get into that. To me, you're a Hall of Famer or you're not. It's rather cut and dried. And there was nobody in the first time list that I even gave real close consideration to.
So Beltran obviously clears the line.
Yep. Speed and power over the course of his career and defense. One of the great switch hitters of modern time, with better than 400 homers, a number of gold gloves, and I can't stress this enough. One of the great postseason performers of all time. That's not hyperbole. He has an OPS in the postseason, and there were a lot of years that he was in the postseason with the Mets, with the Astros, and he has a career OPS over 1,000 in the postseason. I don't necessarily weigh the postseason more than the regular season in my evaluation. To me, it always serves as a boost if a player is somewhat on the line. A great postseason performance in history can help lift him over. I would think that would be applicable to Curt Schilling, a guy whose numbers were, from a regular season standpoint, somewhat on the line. And then you think about his postseason performance, that lifts him up. The same is true of Carlos Beltran. If you have any doubts about his worthiness, look at what he did in October, and the numbers are just breathtaking. As I said, to have a career OPS over 1,000 in the postseason with a lot of postseason games, to me, is the tiebreaker there.
As Elaine learned in the Hamptons, breathtaking is not always a good thing, but in this case, I believe it is.
Yes, I would say, and I got the reference.
That's good. Smitty?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. All that, as Sean said, he could play defense, switch hitter, nine-time All-Star, three-time Gold Glover. You look at the hits, he's just about, I think it's like 280, shy of 3,000. 29th most doubles of all time. He's right there in war with guys like, Jim Thome, Larry Walker. I don't know why I said Alex Walker. Alan Trimble, Barry Larkin, those type of guys. So, yeah, I mean, he just seems like a Hall of Famer to me by the eye test and the stats.
So those are the two that both of you agreed on. Now for the disagreements. We'll lump these two guys together because I think they're very obviously linked together. Manny Ramirez and Alex Rodriguez, in the eyes of Chris Smith, are Hall of Famers. In the eyes of Sean McAdam, are not. Smith, I know you voted for them in the past and you continued that this year.
Yeah, I think actually I was just talking to my wife, Kirsty, and she said she was looking at the last time everybody's on the ballot, and I think it's Manny's last year. So this is Manny's last year, right?
Yep, yep.
So, yeah, I think with them, like I understand Sean's argument, and it's the same too as Alex Spear. Certain guys that do vote for people that have taken steroids, but these guys were tested positive and then did it again, but I also look at the fact that I just don't know the usage of guys that are in the Hall of Fame. I mean, they could have done it throughout their careers. And, I mean, I understand where Sean's coming. I mean, Sean can give a better argument of that, but I just don't I'm just gonna lump all the steroid guys together, all the PED guys together, and and when you look at it, those are two of the greatest hitters of all time. So, everybody when they walk into the Hall of Fame is gonna know these guys use PEDs. So I just, yeah, I mean, and I know that there's players already in the Hall of Fame that have used PEDs.
And Sean, you've always said it's a matter of, not doing yourself any favors and things like that when it comes to these two.
Yeah, I have voted for guys who had PED allegations attached to them. I voted for both Bonds and Clemens. The distinction here being that both Ramirez and Rodriguez knowingly used PEDs after testing and penalties were implemented by Major League Baseball. They knew the consequences. They knew that these were expressly forbidden. They did it anyway, and they did it twice in the case of these two. Look, there's no question, looking at the numbers and thinking about their careers, that both Manny Ramirez and Alex Rodriguez are no question first-time Hall of Famers. Manny with 550-something home runs, arguably one of the greatest right-handed hitters in the modern game. Rodriguez, a several-time MVP, almost 700 home runs, same thing. But to me, many of those numbers are ill-gotten, and I do make a distinction between other guys who were linked, like Clemens, like Bonds, and these two who operated with arrogance after the penalties and testing were implemented by the game. They went ahead and did it anyway multiple times. And the line I always use is, if they don't care, why should I?
So those are the first four on Chris Smith's ballot. Again, Carlos Beltran and Andrew Jones get votes from both Sean and Chris. Manny Ramirez and A-Rod are Chris only. Two more Chris only guys in a year where Chris has six and Sean has two. Chris, this is your time where I call Sean the president of the Jones fan club. Chris Smith is Bobby Abreu's number one supporter this time of year, and that continues in 2026 with another vote.
Yeah, I mean, I've read some articles on him, and a lot of people
Has he ever
talk.
sent you an edible arrangement?
A lot of people talk about, the eye test, and you have to, you can just look at the ballot and know a Hall of Famer is a Hall of Famer. He was kind of under the radar in his era because of other players that were around him, that were bigger names. And, I've seen an Ichiro comparison, and, it makes a lot of sense. He actually had 346 more extra base hits than Ichiro. He had, 926 extra base hits, and, Ichiro had 575. He had a career OPB of 40 points higher than Ichiro's. Now, you look at it and they Ichiro would have played a longer career, obviously, or should have played a longer career. And he was in Japan for a while, but I think he played more games than Ichiro and in MLB. So if you're just taking that into account now, I looked at it, you look at his defense isn't great. He won one gold glove, but there's a lot of negatives on the defensive run saved and all the things that we can see now that we didn't, see before. But I can see both sides on this one, why somebody would vote for him, why somebody wouldn't. So I just look at it as like, if 75% of the voters are going to agree with me, then he's a Hall of Famer. If not, then that's the case, So I just think he kind of goes a little underrated. And if, you look at, if he had had a little bit more defense or whatever, maybe, the gold gloves and stuff like that, then maybe he would have been looked at more right now. So I don't know. I just look at, I think that he was one of the better offensive players of his time, even though, there were so many names that were above him that time. I mean, like, look at when you talk about like the eye test and everything, like, and looking, yeah, I've heard it so many times, like you should be able to look at the ballot and know when a Hall of Famer is a Hall of Famer. And, but there were so many instances back in the day where numbers weren't, shown or numbers weren't looked at that people didn't get an MVP vote because of it. I mean, he didn't get an MVP vote in 2000 when he had a 970 OPS. And there was a reliever that year that got an MVP vote. So like I just think that we just need to look at some things in context and look at the time differently than how we looked at him when he played.
Yeah, I would say that I do appreciate Chris and others highlighting Abreu's career because until I started looking at it more closely, I would have dismissed him out of hand. And I think that's part of the problem with me is that I can't get to a point where if somebody throws the name out, I do not think Hall of Fame when I think Bobby Abreu. But I will say he is highly undervalued for what he did. And the on-base percentage is remarkable. And some of the offensive contributions and the number of doubles and decent slug. My two things holding me back as a corner outfielder, he was not much of a home run hitter. Usually we expect those guys to provide more slug. I think he fell short of 300 homers for his career. And as Chris noted, at best, average defensively. So those two things hurt him in my eye. But I will say, I appreciate the spotlight being shown on him. And he certainly had a better career than I would have thought just off the top of my head. And looking at the numbers, I can understand why people vote for him.
And, he was at 19 and a half in 2025 was his number. In 2024, he was at, survey says, 14.8. So not a huge jump. He's a guy that, I don't think he's trending to get in. Again, I don't have this year's tracker in front of me. He is in his seventh year. So the clock is starting to tick. You talk about, A-Rod and Manny A-Rod in his fifth year. I don't think we expect that he's going to get in via this process, and Manny obviously is not because it's his last year. Abreu's get a guy with time left on the ballot, unless there's a huge jump this year. Kind of hard to see. A
Yeah,
guy, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, given that it is a fairly lackluster group of first timers, it'll be interesting to see who benefits from that.
Yeah.
We expect that Beltran will get in. I certainly hope that Jones does, and he has a pretty good shot. If not this year, then next year, his last. But people always benefit when there's kind of a vacuum.
Yep.
And when there isn't somebody new, getting 60, 70% of the votes first time in, voters tend to look at guys that maybe they've overlooked in the past, and maybe Abreu takes that big jump. But the fact that he's below 20% a few years in is not auguring well for his chances.
So the tracker, not Mr. Tibbs, is back up, and accessible here. So just to kind of tie a bow on the previous discussion, Beltran trending at 89.2. As Sean mentioned, these numbers are usually higher for the people that submit and admit. And he has 50% of the ballots. You're going to see more small hall people, not telling Ryan in advance. So the 50% that's not accounted for, these numbers are going to go down. That's how it works every year. But
where's Jones?
Beltran 89.2, Jones 83.5. You have to feel, relatively okay about, both of them. I think Beltran's probably a shoe-in. Jones right on the line, Sean?
Yeah. Could be a handful of votes either way. I would expect if he falls short this time, he'll get in next year, which will be his last year of eligibility. Nobody has ever gotten this close and not gotten in. So it's a matter of whether we have one or two announced on Tuesday night.
And Manny and A-Rod both already eliminated based on the numbers. A-Rod at 43, Manny at 40. The man we're talking about now, Abreu, is at 38.7, which is a very sizable jump. Again, that number is going to be lower when it comes in, but that's 20 points higher. The Smitty campaign effect working in full, I guess, so far. The next guy we will get to, and I think this is a guy that, you talk about jumps, you talk about potential for the candidacy to really improve over the years. In his first year in 2024, Chase Utley got 28.8% of the vote. There were 9 guys who got more votes than he did. Last year, he got 39.8% of the vote and a pretty big jump. And this year, in a weak class, he is trending at, again, for the 8th time, this number's higher than it'll ultimately finish, 67.9%, which shows you, I think, to me, in his 3rd year, Chase Utley is trending to a guy who is eventually going to get in. Sean, you're not there yet. Chris, you are. We'll start with Chris and why you voted for Chase Utley in 2026.
Yeah, I think the people that vote for him make a strong case in that, statistically from 2005 to 2010, he was one of the best players in baseball. You look at
and you did not vote for him, or you did not vote for him last year, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
People that vote against him take into account, and I'm not speaking for anybody, but there, he did fall 115 hits shy of 2000. I mean, you probably 2000 is a good mark to get into the Hall of Fame. But as I said, that peak of between 2005 2010, he was one of the best players in baseball. Now, also, the thing that kind of got me over this year was I delved more into the defensive stats, and if you fall 115 hits shy of 2000, you have to look also at how defensively that makes up for it. And he had 125 defensive runs saved at second base in his career. He didn't win a Gold Glove in 2008 besides 30 defensive runs saved. So, we talk about kind of the advanced metrics that we look at now and how we would have looked at him differently had he played, like if he had that 30 defensive run save season right now. I mean, people would have been, talking about it constantly this year. And so, they just didn't have the stats of 2008 to kind of, emphasize that and look at it. And so, I look at him as an overall player, and, that's why I made the jump this year with him. I was asked by several people to, reconsider him. And after I didn't vote for him last year and give him you know, look at him a little bit harder this year, and I did, and that's kind of why I got with him. So, yeah, I think you know, both Abreu and Utley are kind of you know, there's a there's that flawed how like that case where you have to look at their careers now if we were viewing them right now as opposed to back then. And I know he's not like that old, but you know what I mean.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, this is part of. I want to briefly address three players, all of whom I have kind of in the same basket: Utley, Dustin Pedroia, and Felix Hernandez.
And that is where we're going next. So this is a
Okay,
great segue. We don't even need me, really.
you don't have to tell me.
No.
We're seeing a trend in the voting where people are emphasizing what's called peak periods. That is shorter periods of dominance and excellence. And all three of those guys, King Felix, Pedroia, and Utley, qualify there. You might even stretch it to include David Wright. I thought he fell a little short, so I keep him out of this conversation for now. All three of these guys, for a period of, let's go anywhere from 6 to 8 years, were among the best players in the game, no question. And it's been said before, if Dustin Pedroia hadn't had that takeout slide for Manny Machado, if he had been healthier for another 4, 5, 6 years, he would have gotten well over 2,000 hits. He would have padded his offensive numbers. He might have won another Gold Glove or two and solidified his case for the Hall of Fame. He did not. There are people who are now, given that we are in an era where we're not going to see another 300 game winner. That's obvious, unless Justin Verlander somehow hangs on for 12 wins a year for 3 more years or something. The era of the 300 game winner is over. It may well be that the era of the 3,000 hitter is over. So we are now looking at different criteria. We are not looking for compilers. We are not looking for career benchmarks. We're looking for, in some cases, was this player, a great all-time player for a significant period of his career? And in the case of all three of those guys I just mentioned, Felix Rodriguez,
Hernandez.
Excuse me, Dustin
You're thinking about
Pedroia,
K-Rod.
yeah,
He's not getting a vote.
no, and Chase Utley, were all great for a period. In my mind, that period of dominance was not long enough. And as I wrote in my column last Friday, I may someday, and it may be as soon as next year, come around to thinking that, okay, 7, 8 great years at the peak of your career is good enough. We don't have to have 15 great years anymore. And I may change my mind on all three of those guys down the road. I hope they stay on the ballot to give me that chance. For now, I'm not there yet, but it is a trend that is emerging in voting, and I'll be fascinated to see the kind of jumps all three of these guys take on Tuesday.
Yeah, and I said last year, and I stick by it. Like when you think about like smell test, who just jumps off the page to me as a Hall of Famer, like, and I Felix Hernandez is at the top of the list when you just think the name to me, just because he was so ridiculously dominant in his peak. He was more dominant of a player to me by far than Pedroia and Utley were, just because he was like the number one pitcher in baseball, right, or the number two.
Yeah, I mean, he had
For like six,
he
five
had
or
one
6
Cy
years.
Young and two second place finishes. So,
But
but it was a brief period of dominance.
yeah, and so
He pitched for, I don't know, 14 years, and 6 were great, and a bunch of those were either pretty average or less than that.
yep, and he got 20.6 last year, so not close. He is trending this year at 56.6, a huge jump. Again, gonna come down. When you talk about, Utley and him, obviously, Pedroia is a guy that in this market gets um, a lot of talk. The jump is not there for Dustin, according to the metrics. He was at 11.9 last year. He's trending at 25.9. So people are clearly higher on Utley than Pedroia. Obviously, Utley is a little further down the line in his third year. Pedroia is in his second. Smith, where did you stand on Pedroia and Felix especially?
Yeah, so Felix is an extremely interesting argument here because we do talk about peak performance. And I looked at it and I'm like, he did nothing really past his age 30 season. And Spot. That said, some people did send me some information that I've looked at and I will reconsider next year. And one of the best stats that somebody sent me was is that from 2006 through 2015. Um, he led Major League Baseball in innings. So you look at it and you say, well, the longevity wasn't there or whatever. Well, over a 10-year span, he did lead Major League Baseball in innings, and he had a 3.13 ERA during that stretch and a 3.21 FIP during that stretch. And so in 25 complete games. And I think that when I look at it, when I have looked at Felix Hernandez the past 2 years, I have more seen he didn't pitch really past, he didn't pitch well at all. He didn't pitch much past the age of 30, and his WAR isn't comparable to, guys in the Hall of Fame. And if you're going to leave Kurt Schilling out of the Hall of Fame, which I know
Did
that's a
he
stupid,
did this guy pitch in the playoffs at all? Zero, right?
I don't know, but
Yeah, no, they had that long,
Yeah,
you know, uh,
crazy.
15, 16 year
Right. Well,
stretch
I
there that
encompassed his career. So he
yeah,
did
I
all
mean,
this with a bad team, which take that for what you will. I mean,
yeah.
it says
But
something about him.
and I'm like, well, if you don't have Kurt Schilling in the Hall of Fame, now I know Kurt Schilling's probably a bad example here because he dug his own grave. If he hadn't said, don't vote for me in the last year, he would probably be on the ballot because he was
Yeah.
at like 71 or 72% anyway. But I just look at some pitchers that are of like Kurt Schilling's caliber that were on the ballot for 10 years and just didn't get in. And you look at Felix and he has a significantly lower WAR than those guys, which shows you that, he didn't have that durability over time. However, as I said, over that 10-year period, he did have the most innings. And so I think that another argument is that we just can't judge pitchers like we used to judge pitchers, right? Like, getting to 180 innings in a season is, an accomplishment now. So if we're going to continue to judge pitchers in the way that we have as Hall of Famers and put them up to the standards of Hall of Famers, then nobody might get into the Hall of Fame except for Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, and Clayton Kershaw for the rest of eternity. So we do have to change some of the standards of pitchers. So he's definitely going to be somebody that I really consider next year, like I really consider Chase Utley this year. With Pedroia, I've heard the argument that obviously peak is an important argument, and he was great. And one person said to me, at a game this year, I asked him, why do you vote for Pedroia? And he said, well, he was one of the best defensive or one of the best overall second basemen of his era. And, but with him, I mean, if Utley's not in the Hall of Fame, I don't think he should be in the Hall of Fame. But, I think with him, you look at it and I've heard an argument recently with Pedroia that if he had played if he played a couple more seasons and his WAR would like you would have looked at his WAR and been like, that's a Hall of Famer. And you look at it and this is a guy that's career was ended not by his own doing, right? There was a Manny Machado's slide was a dirty slide and it ended his career really, and he didn't accumulate any stats after that. So you have to look at I guess some people will look at I mean, his career was shortened not by his own doing here. And so I think that I've taken that into consideration too. But I'll read what I wrote here. So his B WAR was 12.7. His baseball reference WAR was 12.7 points lower than Utley's, and Utley is in an Hall of Fame. Now you look at it, and Pedroia's combined B WAR over his last three healthy seasons were 11.9. So even if he had three more healthy seasons at what he did at that pace, he would have just made it to Utley's standard right there, and Utley isn't in the Hall of Fame. And so, you can't just say that he would be in the Hall of Fame if he had just played three more, or if he just played a couple more seasons. And, that's just inaccurate, I think.
Hmm.
And another thing with Felix I remember is just like, I saw it last year. He went to spring training in 2020 and somebody asked him, "Why are you here?" Like, what are you doing here? Like, why not retire? And he said, "Well, I'm trying to get some more stats for the Hall of Fame because I'm not a Hall of Famer yet, or, my cumulative stats aren't Hall of Fame worthy yet, or something similar to
You're
that."
gonna hold
And
that against him when he's trying to be candid?
I appreciate the candidness. Maybe he needs to look at his own self differently, though, in context. And that's what I'll do next year. Like, a pitcher compared to, like, maybe you don't need those longevity stats.
Hmm.
And so, like, when people like, how did you not vote for Felix Hernandez? Well, he also did, he also doesn't think that he has a longevity stat. He looks
Right.
at, he didn't pitch past 30, and so he was trying to do more. And then after that 2000, he never pitched beyond that comment. And so, yeah, so I just look at it with those guys as you can, the longevity, like, I've heard it with Pedroia many times. Like, you can add on 3 seasons. If he had 3 more healthy seasons, he would have been a Hall of Famer. But I just don't look at it that way. We don't know. Yeah.
And
Yeah, you can't presume someone's performance.
the other guys, you guys, to put a bow on the whole thing, did not vote for, did not consider. So again, Beltran and Jones are tracking to get in as of the ballot. Utley's next. Behind them is Andy Pettit. I think that's an obvious one. Admission, all that type of stuff. Plus a borderline guy. Neither of you considered him. Then it goes Felix, A-Rod, Manny, Abreu, and then Hamels, Pedroia, Jimmy Rollins. On Pettit, Cole Hamels, Jimmy Rollins, Mark Burley, David Wright, Omar Vizquel, K-Rod, Torrey Hunter, and then the rest of the group, which Sean mentioned, Ryan Braun, Edwin Encarnacion, Rick Porcello, Hunter Pence, Nick Markakis, who took strike one, Shin-Soo Choo, Daniel Murphy, Howie Kendrick, Matt Kemp, Alex Gordon, Gio Gonzalez. That's a lot of names. Did you give a second thought to anyone on that list, Sean?
No, in a word.
Yeah, I mean, not even, Hamels or Pettit or any of those guys didn't even.
No, I mean, you can't ignore Pettit's. Pettit had a great career. He was a very good number two starter on an excellent team. But to me, he's kind of borderline, and the PED stuff kind of pushes him off.
And Smith, any of those guys
Yeah.
worth considering?
Yeah, pennant right there. I did consider that. And, what Sean just said also, he had a 3.85 ERA, and people compare his career to, CC Sabathia's. Well, CC Sabathia had a larger, or an ERA similar to that. I think CC's was like 3.7. So, you look at it that way and you compare those careers. But CC also
374.
had, what's that?
374 for Sabathia.
Yeah. But, you look at it, and so, like, why did I vote for CC Sabathia last year? And I didn't vote for Andy Pettitte this year. Well, CC Sabathia did get over 3,000 strikeouts in his career. I'll look this up real quick, how many strikeouts Pettitte had.
2448. I'm on it right now.
And so,
2,448.
like, if you're gonna, if you're gonna if you're gonna have an ERA that high, I guess at least have over 3,000 strikeouts in that. I mean, I know people look at pennants, um,
Postseason.
postseason and take that into account and all that, but yeah, I mean, and as I said with Felix, like, you look at some of these guys that aren't in, like Kurt Schilling, and I keep bringing up the Kurt, but there's many pitchers on Kurt Schilling's level that were like, borderline. And who would you rather have pitch on your team? Like, if Bert Schilling or Andy Pettitte, like in a big game too. So, like, yeah, I mean, I just look at it like he just doesn't make the cut there.
Yeah, and the similar pitchers, similarity scores for Pettit are Sabathia, Musina, Bartolo Colon, Verlander, David Wells, Jack Morris. So it's like whack-a-mole, Hall of Fame or not, Hall of Fame, throughout that list. Tim Hudson, Mark Burley, Zach Greinke, Kevin Brown. So yeah, so that wraps it up. Another, good discussion. I always forget if it's your 10th year or if it's the year after your 10th year. Um, so maybe I'll be joining you next year on this conversation. But to one more time, that's Smitty with Abreu, Beltran and Jones, Manny, A-Rod, and Utley, and Sean McAdam with just the two Hall of Famers, Carlos Beltran and Andrew Jones. The voting results will be released on Tuesday.